So we are in Saskatoon, sitting down with President of the British Columbia Football Conference, Tyler McLaren. We are in Saskatoon for the Canadian Bowl on Saturday, as well as the CJFL annual general meetings that take place the next couple of days. Tyler, I know you're busy, so thanks for taking a few minutes with us.
No problem, anytime.
Just kind of step back. It's your first year as president after being involved with the league at the board level for a few years. Just kind of fill us in. What's gone well? What kind of challenges? What do you want to see improved?
I think it was overall a good year for the conference. I mean, the on-field product was great with the parity that we had, and I think we built a lot of foundational pieces to work together in the future. The teams cooperated well. The teams were receptive to change, receptive to new ideas. So all in all, on the field, the parity and the competitive balance that we had, I think was refreshing to see with so many teams in the playoff hunt. And also the cooperation from our board, which extends to the teams and our coaches, was better than most years, so that's a step in the right direction.
What about challenges? Anything that you weren't happy with specifically once you drastically changed?
Yeah, I think there's always challenges. I think it's a matter of identifying what those are. We've got our challenges like any other organization. Obviously, players and player retention and player acquisition and those types of ideas are important, and just the success and stability of the organization as a whole. So those are always challenges that we have to overcome, and as a group in our conference and a national entity, I think we did a pretty good job in 2018 dealing with that.
One of the problems the league did have this year that was perhaps out of our scope, the forest fires, and just what seems to be happening with the climate change. We had games on alert. We actually had to cancel one game. Looking forward, does the league have any hard and fast plans as to maybe approach scheduling next year yet, or what's the thoughts?
Thoughts, I think what we have to do is this year we only have the one bye week on the Labor Day, and I think looking at that now norm, I think we have to schedule a later bye week, perhaps at the end of September leading into the playoffs. That's something that I would think is a very good idea. It is the new norm. It is what we are now experiencing, and nobody likes to cancel the games, and it's a pain for everybody, and nobody likes doing it. But for that particular game and any inconveniences that we incurred, we had to take the approach of doing what's in the best interest and the safety of the players, and if that is an inconvenience or whatnot, that's just the way it is, because obviously with smoke and breathing that kind of air that we can get now in the summer, you can't put players' health at any kind of risk. So the teams dealt with it fine this year. It's an inconvenience. It was not something that anybody likes to do, but at the end of the day, we have to look out for the best interest of our athletes.
Attendance this year across the 16 seemed pretty solid, but we have seen media. We're not getting as much coverage as we used to be in the local papers, which is kind of everywhere due to cutbacks. Any thoughts? Has there been discussion this year about ways to increase the exposure? Has it been discussed that there's a potential issue going forward?
Attendance was good at a lot of the parks this year. I know even in Chilliwack, as an example, the attendance was really high, and they're quite proud. And a lot of that came with the resurgence and the wins and everything they got. But our brand and our entity, like, we were always fighting for that exposure and that attention. And I think, we took strides this year being on TSN radio, which will hopefully give us some notice and get the information about what our league is all about. And hopefully initiatives like that we can build on, and obviously engage our teams to engage the local media with valid content and give them something to cover. And I think in 2018, the product on the field was productive, and I think our league is getting more notoriety, but obviously we have to continue to work on that and make ourselves be something that people want to cover.
High school football in British Columbia may be like everywhere, but we do know at home it's suffering a little bit. I think we lost 2 or 3 teams this year. What kind of a strain is this putting on our teams in terms of recruiting?
It makes it hard because obviously we've got 6 teams in our province, and tackle football numbers are they are down a little bit, both at the high school and community levels, from what I understand. So it is a challenge, but I think the good news is as we now enter, I believe it's year 3 of our provincial sport organization, they're doing fantastic work on the educational side of the safety of football and the steps that have been done to ensure that player safety is is at the top of the mind and so forth. It's an education process that we have to continue to build on. And the good news, like I say, is our provincial sport organization is doing a really good job of educating young players from the youngest levels to build on that and make sure that those athletes know that they're playing a sport that's safe. And I think what has happened is football's taken a bit of a hit lately in the past few years, but I think the trend will be is that as education becomes better and as steps are taken to make sure that safety is addressed and that there's education out there and so forth, and rule changes that we've had this year, I think it'll correct itself. And my feeling is, with the positiveness of what the PSO is doing, I think that trend will change, and that's the hope, that the numbers will hopefully move in the other direction.
5 of the 6 teams in the last few months, 2 recently, have had coaching changes. Interesting. Concerns at all with the turnover?
I don't think there's any real cause for concern. A couple of them we knew that were probably expected, and a couple of them maybe weren't expected, but most of the organizations have, I know in Vancouver Island's case, they reached into their alumni pool and have some solid people now that are there. And I think that's a good trend. I know there's some stability now with Coach Beattie and Coach Boyce in West Shore. So I think that the teams all are building from within, and hopefully having guys that can groom into becoming head coaches or assistant coaches that can lead into head coaches. So our head coaches were as good as I've seen last year, and it's unfortunate to see them lose or leave our teams. But obviously we hope that they're still part of our family and still hope to have them involved in junior football in some way or another.
Let's talk about player safety. Always in the news in CFL and the NFL about player safety. This past weekend, we saw an issue in the semi-final game with Saskatchewan Olympic, where the quarterback got hurt. This year, maybe a lot of people don't know, but the league took the step to allow teams to send in film if they thought they were targeting penalties or things that maybe should have been called that weren't, allowing the league to potentially even suspend players even when the call wasn't made. Let's just talk about that, where the league's going, what you see.
And yeah, we took that initiative. One of the new rules that changed a lot of was the targeting rule that we instituted. The CJFL instituted it this year. So that rule was designed for player safety, and it's been adopted at other levels as well, including youth sports and so forth. So that's one of the rules that we had that has helped, and it's education of players, and there were suspensions that were delivered for that particular infraction. And as far as looking at film, this year we did take the approach, and Paul Short, our league game commissioner, and I talked at great length and said, if there's things out there that we need to see, that we need to address, that we'll look at that kind of stuff. Does it open up a bit of a Pandora's box? Some might think so. But I think the overall point that we're trying to get across to the players and the coaches are that people are looking, and if somebody does something that that the referees may in fact miss, that obviously is beyond a hold or an offside or something that is part of the game, but related to player safety and conduct, that there's eyes watching it. And that's the first time the league has done that, as far as I know, where we've kind of looked at things outside of what the referees maybe have missed, or conduct that we've seen ourselves at the game. So I think it's good to have those extra set of eyes, just to make sure that if a player does do something that could impact the safety and wellness of another player, that we address it. And the teams were pretty receptive of it. I mean, nobody likes to have players suspended or disciplined, but I think at the end of the day, that's the way football's trending. And I think they understand that if it was their player, obviously we're there to protect their player just like everybody else's. So the overall response, I think, was good, and it's something that probably we will look to build on in 2019.
Well, let's talk about this week and this football game. Langley Rams from our conference are in Saskatoon. They've had an impressive year. But we're in the Prairies. We're playing a Prairie football team. The Prairies have dominated us over the years. What do you think of the Rams' chances in taking on that PFC?
The thing I like, and it's obviously a challenge coming out this way, and that's something that the Rams, I think, will deal with well. The good thing that I think that they have in their favor is they're big on the line of scrimmage, which I think is a good trait when you're playing a Prairie football team. They have that dominant player, a guy like Javon Catoy, who just continues to make play after play after play, and is one of the best, if not the best player in our league. So when you got a player of that skill set too, it's an equalizing factor. But just the fact that their quarterback Duncan Little has played in the Prairies, so that's going to help that type of experience. And just the fact that, like I say, they should be able to compete, hopefully be able to compete at the line of scrimmage, because I think that's where it's won or lost.
But it is the Prairies. It's tough to come in here and win a football game.
Absolutely, and like I say, I think I know the Hilltops tradition and what they've accomplished, and they really are the benchmark for the entire CJFL. And their past record speaks for itself, and their championships and everything else are in a world of their own. And that's obviously even within their own conference, they're in a world of their own. And in the CJFL right now, they're in a world of their own. But again, I think the Rams, if they come in and play a solid game, their foundation, and in talking with Coach Howie, and he said minimize the mistakes. They did that in the Cullen Cup against a really good Okanagan Sun team. They did that against Hamilton. If you don't donate, turn the ball over, and give points and give short fields to people, you just play sound football, don't take penalties, don't short field, don't turn the ball over, I think they can have some success.
As I mentioned, the annual general meeting is taking place the next 2 days. Any thoughts on the Canadian Junior Football League, where the BCFC sits within the organization, where you see the league in the next 5 years?
I think this year's been a good year for us, and I think we have to. The CJFL no different than the BCFC has its challenges and obstacles to overcome. I think we're headed in the right direction with some of the changes that hopefully happen and get implemented this weekend. So I think obviously there has to be some changes when it comes to the playoff structure, in my opinion. Don't know what those necessarily would look like now, but that's what we're here for, obviously, this weekend. But that's one of the things I think we have to. The costs are just becoming so staggering that something I think we need to get under control and look for a competitive balance and try and share best practices across all three of the conferences and hopefully get those put into action, because all the conferences across the entire country all have their own set of unique challenges. And I think the faster and the more attention can be put on the fact that there are differences within those conferences that need to be respected and addressed, and not kind of think everybody's dealing with the same problems. I think that's one thing I'm looking to hopefully see that comes out of this weekend, that the CJFL acknowledges that and builds toward that, because what's happening in BC might not be the same in Ontario or the Prairies. So that's one thing I hope that we come away looking and going, okay, there's some challenges in every market, and how do we work together and make them better?
Next year, the British Columbia Football Conference champions host the Canadian Bowl. So we get the other conference, whether it's the OFC or the PFC, in our park. Where do you see that going next year? On occasion, a thought of a neutral site comes up. Any talks at the BCFC level about that yet? Or?
Some people have mentioned it, the neutral site philosophy. Personally, I think the model with having the extra week that we now have to prepare for the Canadian Bowl, I think is a good thing to sell for sponsorships and fan interest and media coverage and everything else. That extra week I think is really helpful. I think that there's been talk about a tournament style format for playoffs, but I think there's still some things that have to get worked out in that regard as well. Sort of like a Memorial Cup type of thing that hockey is implemented, but I think there's some challenges and some logistical things that need to be worked out. But obviously, if you're going to do a format like that, BC is a good spot to do it because of the proximity of all of our teams. So depending on what happens, and if there has been Canadian Bowls that sometimes do get moved around, sometimes it might be something where we look at it, but I think that's a little ways down the road. But I think hosting the Canadian Bowl, I think, is great for our province. It's great for our football community. Brings notoriety, brings people to BC, and everybody likes being out in BC. It's not a bad place to live, so we're looking forward to, if everything goes the way we think it will, and BC's hosting in 19, we're certainly looking forward to it and being in one of our parks.
British Columbia Football Conference, Ontario Football Conference, Prairie Football Conference, 3 separate entities under one umbrella, the CJFL. Our team grows recruiting players from across the country. Here's your chance as president of the British Columbia Football Conference. Give a commercial to a young player that may be hearing from one of our teams this year as to why you should consider making the BCFC home.
Well, I mean, I think the BCFC's come a long, long way from when I was a player in this league and a coach in this league. And the teams are doing a really, really good job when it comes to their runnings of their teams. Our media coverage is outstanding. BC is obviously a beautiful spot to live, and I think the fact that with the 10-game schedule and the diversity that we have and is out here, it's a great option for people, and more teams are engaging in scholarship programs and different opportunities for players to come out this way. And to be honest with you, our parks, our stadiums and all of our venues, which continue to get better and better all the time, are great junior football stadiums and facilities for these games to be played. A lot of them have great atmospheres. The stadiums and the cities within most of our teams are making improvements to those venues. So it's refreshing to see when a team gets something new added to their stadium, because that just enhances the experience for the players. And our parks have changed so much since I played. They're great venues to play in, and can't beat the weather in BC. That's always a plus.
And now, just to wrap up, the Langley Rams, our team, are in the Canadian Bowl. The Rams are a franchise that you've got a history with, coaching the team back in 2005. What do you want to say to the Langley Rams heading into the game this weekend?
Well, obviously, as BC, we want to wish them luck and thank them or congratulate them on the season and thank them for representing our conference as well as they have. I know Dana Matheson, who I played with and coached with, has done an amazing job as the president of the Rams, and Howie Zarin, who I know as well, known for a long time, has done an awesome job as a head coach. So they've overcame some obstacles, and that team has done a really good job. And obviously, as a conference, we wish them well, and hope the Canadian Bowl can be brought back to BC this year.
Thanks for doing this, Mr. President. We appreciate it, and talk to you in the new year.
No problem. Anytime.